There's something wrong with this picture, okay?
However, if I show up in Moscow, I might fall out of a window. And 8 years into my service, this is the Order of the Red Banner.
And then I know that the FBI found you. Jack Barsky is a former sleeper KGB agent turned American patriot. With an epic story that has been featured on 60 Minutes and a number of major platforms, he is a prominent speaker, author of the book Deep Undercover, and a personal friend.
There is no liberty the way it was constructed in the United States. So we're losing some of that as well.
Do you want to build a truly extraordinary life, what we call an exponential life? My weekly newsletter brings you insights, stories, expert conversations, my favorite books and podcasts every Sunday. Subscribers get exclusive access to my monthly group coaching webinars, all for free. And for the cost of a latte a month, you can help support our work and access our full archives. Subscribe at christianrayflores.com. Jack Barsky, my friend, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I'm glad we're doing it.
Thanks for having me, as they say, as everybody says when they get onto a TV show.
Oh, man, I'm so excited about talking to you on camera. We've had hours and hours and hours of talking about this off camera because we're friends and we live in the general vicinity of each other, so that's a good thing. But let's start with a little bit of a backstory because that's fascinating, and obviously the audience can go to find incredible footage of you from 60 Minutes, et cetera, countless amazing podcasts. But you are a young man in East Germany, pre-fall of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, and you get recruited by the KGB. You get trained in Moscow, you get planted in the US, and then you spend years there essentially as a spy. Eventually you make it out of it miraculously intact without going to jail or being killed or returning to East Germany. But tell me, these are stories that people can find about you out there in your book, your amazing book. I read the book. You signed the book for me. I love the book. What I want to hear is this. First encounter with a KGB agent in Eastern Germany.
Talked a little bit about, without specifically mentioning it, but talked a little about what it's like to be an agent, and he felt me out. I know this now in hindsight, because the actual offer took 18 months. When the Soviet Union fell apart and the KGB was dissolved, there were some folks that came out into the public realm and gave interviews. Two of them were ex-heads of the Directorate S, the Illegals Directorate, and they shared how they recruited for illegals like me. The bottom line was, they said, we searched, we combed through several thousand people to find one of those guys who's got what it takes. And there was a list of character traits that they were looking for. And I don't remember all of them, but very smart, quick thinker, unafraid, well-controlled predilection for adventure.
And what, obviously, it's a very broad. Your mission is broad because the way you get to whatever information that's valuable for the Soviet Union is unpredictable at the time. But with your strategic plan to just get into senior leadership of a major IT company or something else.
They stated clearly that the most important value of me being in the United States was me being in the United States. And now I put, I connect the dots. This was towards the end of the Cold War, and there was a espionage war going on between the CIA and the KGB. And they would, if they caught a diplomat spying, they would kick him out. And then there would be retaliation, and occasionally teams were kicked out, and teams were kicked out from the other country.
Oh, so they needed assets to be there that are not at risk. Got it. Yeah.
Yes, particularly in those days, the two most successful spies for the KGB were moles. They were Mole in the FBI was Robert Hansen, and the CIA was Aldrich Ames, and they did a lot of damage. And if all the diplomats are gone, diplomatic relations are broken up. So who's left over? I got no instructions, not a hint what to do if that ever occurs. I operated as a spotter, particularly while I was in college. A spotter is somebody who points out people who either already have access to secrets or may eventually have access to secret. So I profiled, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, particularly students who seemed to be, who they were all really smart, and we were looking for people with an agenda, not necessarily communism, with an ideology.
They're probably prone to some sort of brainwashing or convincing. Let's put it that way.
There's an acronym that we use in intelligence. It's called MICE. That indicates how people can be recruited. So it's money, uh, um, ideology, coercion, and ego.
Ah, that's right. Yeah.
So I stole a piece of mainframe software that I guarantee you was not usable in the Soviet Union because it was meant to run capitalist companies. All right. So they had the entire American culture was built into the software. I'm glad it didn't work out for them.
Yeah. So when did you start doubting the righteousness of your cause and sort of going, I think I'm going to stay? I mean, I know that you stayed because of your family. That was sort of the that was sort of the tipping point, meaning I don't want to leave my family, right? You had a family, you had a daughter, etc. But was there an ideological shift as well?
It was a slow shift, you know, and it paralleled a movement within communist parties in the Eastern Bloc. So the convergence theory was cooked up by social democrat parties in NATO, not communist. They decided that the best the best type of state would be that where the good aspects of communism and capitalism come together. I go back to Moscow. I'm picked up from the airport by a low-level KGB employee, somebody who was like one of the jack of all trades, who does errands and stuff like that. And without prompting, he started talking about how he likes the convergence theory. Now, this was indication to me that there were certain higher level folks in the KGB who embraced that theory because this guy couldn't have come up with it by himself.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think anyone expected that, besides maybe some insiders in the Soviet Union that was seeing the system fall apart. And
Well, there were hardliners. Like the hardliners were the one that actually put Gorbachev under arrest, and there was KGB involved. And then there were the reformers. Okay,
the when the whole thing fell apart, I remember seeing a documentary about the emergence of the Russian mafia, and there were FBI agents giving interviews about it when it first sort of made its appearance. And they were like, it's fascinating. We were used to dealing with, multi-generational Italian mafia. They were very predictable in their ways. And all of a sudden we get the Russians, and all the mafia people have PhDs. And it was because they were just so well educated, and they were just a whole different level of thinking. So they gave they gave the Americans a lot of trouble because of how unpredictable those criminals were, basically.
we had a phenomenal educational system, and you in Russia had a really good education also, right? The only place I could have gone back to would have been East Germany, but then the wall came down afterwards, and I would have wound up in Russia eventually, and I'd be if I'm still alive, I would be a miserable old coot because I had never any allegiance to Russia. I like the Russian people, and you know that, lovely people, but the Russian government throughout history uh, has been um, substandard, to put it mildly.
That is very mild. you mean you mean genocidal, oppressive. Then I know that the FBI eventually found you, and then they rented a house across the street from you. They surveilled you, et cetera, et cetera. And then, how did you manage, besides the fact that the agent that arrested you verified that you had been inactive for years by then, right? You were not really collaborating with the KGB or anything. But still, I mean, if you confess that you were a KGB agent, wouldn't that put you in danger of being in jail, going to jail anyway for past crimes?
Yes, when they first introduced themselves, there were some high level FBI officials that wanted me in jail. So and the guy who was in charge of the investigation convinced the upper levels at the FBI to I would be more valuable not in jail, and he got a commendation from Louis Freeh, the head of the FBI in those days, for that, because of
And what was the value? What was your value that you offered, you think?
my value was who I was, how I was trained, how I was supposed to operate, because that because it's quite simple. The KGB didn't exist anymore, but who trained, or who wound up in the Russian intelligence to begin with, and who trained the next generation? The method, the operandi, very similar. So
I mean, the FBI comes across as awfully nuanced and humane in this story. It's startling to me that you were given so much grace and so much understanding and so much nuance. I mean, I think I'm maybe phased by and imprinted by the methods of the KGB, after growing in Marxist countries, because it just sounds incredibly mild.
there was a logic behind the way they operated. To put me in jail, uh, I won't sing, and I won't cooperate. And once I am in jail, I can make things up because now I'm really pissed off. So there was value in, and again, and I know a person who is friends with Louis Freeh, and Louis Freeh, the FBI director, told my friend that I, I was of high value to the U.S. government.
When you see the KGB operating now under essentially a very similar Cold War 2.0 type scenario, and what do you see has changed in them, perhaps their methods and their approaches?
We're talking about now the three successors. Well, no, the two successors to the KGB. There's the SVR, which and the FSB. One SVR is the CIA, and FSB is the FBI. But fundamentally, the FSB is much bigger, and they do espionage as well. So the SVR is the least capable and the smallest secret service in Russia. And then you have the GRU that never changed, military intelligence that that was continued forward, and they're the most capable ones. They're the ones that have the assassination teams among them.
It's called the mysterious Russian death. Uh, People falling out of windows, having accidents, things like that.
First of all, the KGB, and we already pointed it out, didn't really know how the United States works. So they were involved in active measures. That is like the phony information, disinformation, and tried to spread it into the media. In those days was print and maybe radio, but they didn't know how the country works. How do you undermine a country if you don't know how it operates? The knowledge nowadays that Russia has of how the United States works is immense, because the exchange students, there's businessmen coming here, there's cultural exchanges, the borders are open. Okay, so that makes them more dangerous, particularly when it comes to placing um, disinformation on the internet. You know, the old Internet Research Agency that was owned by Prigozhin, the guy who died this interesting death. uh, they have done a lot of damage, but not to the point that they added to the damage that we're doing to ourselves. Okay, it's because it's 100 people roughly that create like phony messages and phony people on the internet, but uh, that's a drop in the bucket. And anyway, when they did election interference, they just wanted to uh, um, undermine the faith of the American public in the electoral system. They didn't care as much about who gets elected. Now that may have changed because it looks like they're a little bit afraid, more afraid of President Trump because of his erratic behavior. What they have a disadvantage over the KGB, they're not as well funded. They don't have the means. Look, and again, it's all educated guesses, but my educated guesses are based on an education that is based on reality. So in 2010, the FBI arrested 10 illegals. They were in the country illegally, but I don't know if they didn't pretend to have been born in the United States. They either went to Brazil and legally became first illegally became Brazilians or Canadians and then came to the U.S. But they were illegals operating under false name. And there is an interesting FBI surveillance video out there that shows them in operation. And I watched this video. You can find it on YouTube. And I was screaming at the screen. It's like this. You can't do that. This is ridiculous. They operationally they had practically no preparation. They were amateurs, rank amateurs.
The spycraft has been lost, has been diluted, basically, right?
Yes, they still do the evil things, and they still try to recruit people, and they probably uh, are still successful because money. The color of green is a very attractive color, but the quality and as well as they just don't have the resources that the KGB had to find us and train us one on one, not in schools, and train us and use the best resources they had, and then maintain us.
They're doing their work, but it's their the quality of the training is inferior to what it used to be.
Oh, and they do a lot of dirty work, and and that I think you know what I'm talking about. Um, as much as I love Russian people, but with regard to producing quality products,
Russia is not known for exporting competitive goods, except for maybe weapons, matryoshkas, and vodka, and things like that.
yeah, exactly. That is why. By the way, I'm going to show you something on 1 second here. 8 years into my service in the U.S., I received this thing here. This is the order. This is the Order of the Red Banner of the Soviet Union, not the KGB, the Soviet Union. So that means some high-level KGB guy must have told the decision-making committee there, high level, that this guy is really good, and we have our man there, and he's operational. So, and the irony is that I got a monetary award of $10,000, and by the way, I might be on that list, but if there's a list of people that we want to do harm to, I'm way at the bottom. Uh, However, if I show up in Moscow, I think I might fall out of a window, and I tell you why. Vladimir Putin is a master at scaring the heck out of people.
In my book, Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America, I describe the experience of crossing from East Berlin to West Berlin when I was a teenager, and basically we would come in from Moscow to Berlin to see my cousin who actually still lives there, and she was married to an East German, et cetera, et cetera. So we would come, we would have place to stay, and then all of my family who didn't have double citizenship, which is my mom, my cousin, et cetera, couldn't cross. But my sister and I had Chilean Soviet at the time. So my sister and I would cross with hard currency, German marks and dollars, and then we would like buy things to sell in Russia on the black market. That's how we made our money basically. And it was so distinct, the crossing. It was like going from black and white grayscale mediocrity to multicolor, 3D, which is the way people dressed, the colors, the ads, the malls, the stores, all of that stuff. And one thing in particular I use in the book as an extraordinary example of how the same exact people, the same language, the same industriousness. The Germans are famous for engineering, right? That the same people that built Mercedes and Audi and BMWs, et cetera, after a few decades of being sort of enslaved and basically oppressed in the Eastern Europe, the same people, just a few decades later, they could they produced the Trabant, the worst car ever made in the history of humanity. And my cousin had one, so we would drive in that thing, and it was like driving in a tin can. Okay,
Yeah, exactly. I was going to tell you, it's made out of carbon. It had 24 horsepower. The last lawnmower that I had, a ride-on mower, had 30 horsepower. East German landscape and the people there was a movie made in black and white, and over there on the other side it was a color movie. It was astounding. Even the policemen were uniformed in a nice light blue as opposed to East Germany dark green.
I was putting that together in high school, and I was seeing the difference. And those were the seeds of there's something wrong with this picture. Okay, you know? Like we would go to my sister and I would cross over. The first thing we would do is go to McDonald's. That was like the promised land, right?
McDonald's, when the first McDonald's was opened in Moscow, the lines were longer than the lines at the Lenin Mausoleum.
I was there. I was there. I stood on those lines. I was like, because it was just a taste of the West. That's what it was. And like I would remember I could stand in line for a couple hours easily in that, and it was the biggest McDonald's in the world, and still you had to stand there for 2 hours. I mean, I wouldn't be caught dead in a McDonald's right now, right? Like, there's no way. Those of us who grew up in centralized, top down places where censorship starts creeping in, we can see it ahead of time. When we see sort of this cultural Marxism creeping in, what do you see? Let's go back and forth about it, because I think we can commiserate.
Okay, the only country I can talk intelligently about is Germany. Obviously, uh, after I got my passport, U.S. passport, I traveled right back to Germany and visited friends and family. I had two sons there, and I got an idea of what the country is like. And I was back for my book tour. I was back with CBS 60 Minutes, so I had a lot of interaction with my German friends that were still alive, and I understood that I wouldn't like living in Germany anymore, simply because the federal government has way too much power, and the people are quite all right with that. So when they were complaining about something that wasn't working right, they, somebody would say, "Those people up there, they need to do something about it."
They got accustomed to a paternalistic government. Yeah.
To the government doing everything, and the government actually tracks people quite intensely. There's internal passports; you got to have one. And I think when you move from one city to another, you have to actually register in the second city. So sort of, yeah, shades of what happened in East Germany when you had a visitor in your apartment, you had to register with the guy in charge of that particular apartment complex. So the Stasi knew where everybody was everywhere. So so there is no liberty the way it was constructed in the United States. So we're losing some of that as well.
Really interesting. The shift towards a paternalistic um, state where the government is the solution. So if there's a problem, okay, we just need to change somebody in the government because the government's supposed to take care of this thing for me, right?
Yeah, paraphrased nicely. And also, the government is the benign government that gives away free stuff. You get a free education. Uh, and their generous vacations. I mean, the government. So people think that all goodness comes from above, and they may complain about some of the high taxes that they're paying, but we're getting it. Well, no. The bottom line is, if you have a big central government, it takes money out of the pot because the central government does not create value.
Yes, and I think we definitely have been on a trajectory. We're lagging behind Western Europe, but we're definitely on a trajectory. And I think those of us who either lived in Marxist countries or studied Karl Marx and understand the mechanics of it, the principles, we can see that a mile away.
And this is not just Democrats. If you look at the growth of the federal budget since World War II, it has grown under every president, including President Reagan. So it's not just one party, it's both of them.
The state will grab more influence, more power, and more money unless it's actively opposed, unless some sort of initiative uh, opposes that effort. Basically,
And that therein lies the brilliance of the Constitution. The founders were exactly afraid of what you and I don't like. We want our freedom. I want to have, and I had the freedom here for the longest time. I want to have the freedom to make my own mistakes. I have a concept of what's called the national DNA. So, for instance, one feature of the Russian national DNA is the knowledge that they will be attacked. They have always been under attack. And what's in the American DNA is the pioneer spirit. It's a, the entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah, I want to go out and do something and make a better life for my family. I'm not looking for handouts. So that is very difficult to overcome by somebody who wants to just take over, like a centralized government, whatever.
I agree. And the thing is, even before that became very evident as like a real cultural pushback against socialized, sort of collectivized, not meritocracies, but collectivist sort of trends. I remember having a conversation with that with a bunch of guys who were, I think, church leaders, and they were like, "Christian, you were born there. We see this thing going. Is this it? Like this is over?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." Actually, and I basically used the term antibodies for the first time in that conversation, where I said, "I think this particular culture has antibodies that will ultimately reject this kind of movement towards sort of top-down, collectivistic, not anti-meritocracy um, type of way of doing things, basically." So,
We're thinking 100% alike, except we're using a different terminology to express the same thing.
so Jack, two things in a post-Marxist Eastern sort of, I was in Russia um, framework versus America. One, family values. I had some of them loosely, but not strong, and I just didn't have enough roots in that strong convictions at all. Two, um, faith. Didn't have any of those things. And when I moved to the States, I feel like it's much more weaved into the fabric of society. Family values is sort of universal, whether you're Christian or not. Family values is a big thing, and then faith as well. You might not even be an active sort of believer or churchgoer, but you have the values still that are derived from the Bible. Do you see that same phenomenon between Eastern Europe and when you moved here? Do you ever feel like something's holding you back from reaching your full potential? I'm giving away free access to my Xponential scorecard. It's the same tool I use with clients to uncover strengths and reveal hidden areas that might be holding you back. It's a powerful first step towards real growth. You can access your personalized assessment at exponential.life/score.
I haven't studied this, but I know the family that I grew up in was not really tight. We would occasionally hang out over the holidays, but there was there weren't very few emotions in our relationships, and believe it or not, so two sets of grandparents, my father, my mother, and three sets of aunts and uncles. And the entire time I was growing up in that family, I never heard the words "I love you." Never. Not just to me, but spoken to one another. My boundaries were set by the state, by the school system primarily while I was in school. Okay, there were certain things that you just don't do and you get punished. So, so I was raised very much by the collective, and so was everybody else. That was part of the culture. Faith. Our faith was the faith in a false ideology, which is both atheism and communism. And you don't have to be a believer in a particular religion to understand that there has to be a higher power in this world. Atheism is as stupid a religion as there is. That everything that we have just came into existence spontaneously, and then it organized itself, and to have the variety that we're looking at. Come on, and I believed in that stuff.
Like maybe you and I can talk about this a little bit. Being both Christians, now we actually are part of the same church now, which is kind of cool.
Okay, Pastor.
But I wasn't going to mention that, but okay. I think Marxism fundamentally is a religion. You have the highest authority, which is what? Which is what? The state.
The state or the party or both.
Then you have the original sin, which is, I think, the what is it? Is it the oppression or the injustice? Social justice is the original sin.
And there are elements in our country these days who believe in that as well. Uh, and this is primarily elitist. Elitism is a very destructive force in our country right now. This like every time I think of the book, It Takes a Village. So no, Hillary, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be mentioning any names, but it takes a functioning family. And the reason that in a capitalist society we need to have a functioning family because it's a little bit dangerous with all the competition out there, and it's there's no real safe haven. Your safe haven is a family, and if it's a functioning church, it's also your church because I if it, if people, and I found this out even before I became a Christian, truly believe in Christian values, they're good people. Because nobody in their right mind who is a good person can argue with what Jesus taught, regardless of whether they believe in the existence of Jesus or not. What's being taught is so humane, so universally accepted across all kinds of countries and ethnic populations. And this is interesting. A little sidebar. I developed a master class for my project, and the master class is actually speaking to secular audiences, and it's not a testimony in church. And when I eventually I let this sit there for a while, and when I started
And
looking
you're
at
my
it again,
favorite ex-Russian
I
pop star.
realized that practically every piece of advice I give in there has its root in the Bible.
I know you have an amazing book out, which I love. I've read the whole thing, obviously. I'm very excited about you offering some of that wisdom that you share with us today in a more formal way.
And, I already mentioned my master class, and I think we're going to launch by the end of this month It's under the heading of psychology, but I will produce content. We're going to try to assemble a tribe, a community of like-minded people finding themselves and finding a way to live their best lives.
Yes, you do. So, how can people find this psychology thing? Is that up?
Well, it's going to be advertised. It's going to be announced on social media. Everything but X. You'll find ads. Some of them actually, I think we're going to pay for them. But I will announce on also social media when that's going to happen.
Well, my friend, you are most definitely my favorite spy. So definitely rooting for psychology to be a great success and impart a lot of wisdom on with many people.
Well, that was as expected. We already knew that it was going to be. It was a really good conversation. So now you just pushed another person out of the top five interviews that I've had in my life, and I think it may be CBS 60 Minutes that's now felt.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm sure it's not the last conversation we'll have online.
No, of course not.
All right, my friend, I'll let you go. Thanks for coming on.